The railway was a late arrival in some parts of West Yorkshire, delayed by a need to flatten the Pennines' formidable landscape and the costs involved. But needs must. As industries grew, they became ever hungrier for raw materials and connections to new export markets. To remain competitive, local mill owners promoted a line between Halifax and Keighley through terrain many regarded as insurmountable. What the Great Northern Railway achieved against unattractive odds was a line overwhelmed by heavy engineering, the greatest feat being a tunnel of 2,501 yards beneath the village of Queensbury. It hasn't seen a train since the tracks were lifted in 1963, but that doesn't mean the tunnel can no longer play a transport role. To meet our changing obligations in the 21st century, shared paths are increasingly breathing new life into former railway alignments and many impressive structures as the government promotes active travel.
Which improves health, which improves air quality, which improves sense of community and well-being, which stimulates businesses and is good for all kinds of other things which are actually quite difficult to quantify. But government money is available for using structures which we already have, like this tunnel, and there are others of course all around the country, to develop much better forward-looking means of people moving around.
But Queensbury Tunnel presents particular problems. More than 60 years without substantive maintenance has left parts of it in poor condition. Indeed, Highways England, who look after the tunnel on the Department for Transport's behalf, believe it's a threat to the community 400 feet above and is pursuing an abandonment scheme. Work is due to start soon, at a cost to the taxpayer of more than £3 million. A local campaign group believes that money will be better spent on repairs to bring this audacious Victorian structure back into use. A Sustrans study has suggested that a cycle network connecting Bradford and Keighley to Halifax via the tunnel could generate £37.6 million in social and economic benefits over 30 years. But for that to happen, Bradford Council would have to take on the tunnel's ownership. With the clock ticking loudly, engineers acting for the council recently spent 2 weeks in the tunnel, undertaking a series of investigations, brickwork coring, ground-penetrating radar and the like, as well as using a laser scanning system to produce a 3D model for analysis purposes. The findings will inform decision-making around the viability and cost of repair. Although 80% of the tunnel remains in fair condition, there would be much to do.
There are a few areas that are starting to have a bit of distress. Some of those defects have been there a long while. Some of them we do suspect are probably getting worse over the last few years. But in general, there seems to be very little change. However, there are two very short sections where there's partial collapses of the haunch of the tunnel. And those will need thinking about much more carefully in order to firstly make a safe access route through those areas and then be able to infill the voids that have been created by the collapses with something like foam concrete.
Queensbury Tunnel is wet, notoriously so, with much of the water ingressing via 5 ventilation shafts, which represent the source of greatest concern to Highways England. There's little doubt that the challenges involved in repurposing it would be considerable, but so too is the public funding demanded by abandonment. For the campaigners, it's about value for money and a vision of this historic liability as a strategic asset. Reborn, the tunnel would be a nationally significant landmark on our growing cycle network.
Obviously this was built in the 19th century. It's something of the heritage of Bradford, of Queensbury that really needs to be opened so that people can come down and appreciate what went into the building of the tunnel. We're waiting to see the report, we're waiting to see how much money it will cost to restore the tunnel, what the damage is and whether we can look to use the money for abandonment to repairing the tunnel so that it can eventually be open. I think it's coming towards a time now where it's real judgment time. It's the fact where we have to have a look and we have to make a serious decision.
Across the UK, around 60 disused railway tunnels now serve walkers and cyclists, offering adventure, boosting tourism and honouring our history as engineering pioneers. Adding Queensbury Tunnel to the list before it's too late will involve technical insight, buy-in from stakeholders, landowner agreements, funding and courage. It's a tough call, but an opportunity that will never be repeated.